Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Faith radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thanks for giving and for sharing with a friend.
Doing life together, reaching out with hope, encouraging one another, each step along the road. You and I can make everything a little better, doing life together.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Mintle, the relationship doctor, and I'm here along with my co-host, the other Dr. Mintle, my husband, Norm. And every weekend we're here, we're doing life together, and we're so glad you've joined us.
We just love it that you've joined us. We love it. Love. Okay.
Are you promoting our theme for today?
I'm tipping my hat.
Yes.
We're going to talk about... Now, actually, this is interesting because we wanted to find out whether or not people actually are having love or they're somehow addicted to love.
Right.
Wow. That's kind of a tease.
Yeah, and love is one of our most basic needs, and that's because we're actually wired or designed by God to feel, to enjoy, to express love. But when this takes an unhealthy turn, it can be a negative thing in people's lives.
In terms of this possible love addiction.
Yes.
So maybe a good question to ask yourself as we begin this program is, have I ever felt like I needed someone, not just wanted them, but truly needed them just to make me feel okay? Well, at first it might feel like passion or even destiny, and that's love, and we all get that giddy, wonderful feeling. But over time, that type of need can turn into desperation, anxiety, or fear for some people, right?
Yeah, that's a really good thing to start thinking about. I think the key there when you said it was, do I need them? Like I have to have them.
An obsessive kind of.
Yeah, it turns into an obsession for that person, and you feel really devastated when you're apart, or you just stay in a relationship even when it's unhealthy because you feel like you have to be there. And Norm, a lot of times that's motivated from not wanting to be alone. So it's not just falling hard for somebody. It really is something deeper that we're going to get into.
Deeper, like in some kind of dramatic phase? It sounds like fear maybe gone awry.
Well, studies show that for some people, romantic relationships can trigger emotional behaviors that closely resemble substance addiction.
Oh.
So we're going to look at that from that point of view.
Oh, that's interesting. Hey, remember that song Addicted to Love that came out back in the...
Don't say how long ago. It was a long time ago.
It was several decades ago.
It was.
So that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
An addiction.
we are.
That mimics drug addiction or food addiction or...
Yeah. Now this isn't officially in the diagnostic manual that we use, the DSM-5-TR, it's called, that we use to diagnose clinical conditions. So it's not that.
Oh.
But the term love addiction is often used by therapists and researchers to describe this compulsive pattern of behavior that we're talking about, which involves intense emotional dependence on a romantic partner.
So it sounds a lot more complex than just being clingy or needy.
Right. It is more complex. And someone with love addiction may constantly seek emotional highs from affection or attention. So that's how it's similar in some ways to substance addiction, right? And when that connection is disrupted, like maybe they have a conflict or a breakup, or even a few hours without just talking to that person, they may experience some type of withdrawal symptoms like anxiousness or emptiness or even sometimes panic.
Okay, I'm still having trouble distinguishing between the extreme of puppy love from a 10th grader. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a way of coping. So, it's you can be in love with somebody, but when that love feels so needy and you have to be with them to feel like this high that we're talking about, or when you're away from them, you feel this withdrawal, like you can't go on, you get anxious. We're talking about it when it moves into an unhealthy way of wanting that other person, or needing, as you said originally, needing that other person. And it's a way of coping that people have, rather than this sort of healthy mutual connection that we have with each other.
Coping was the word I was going to use to ask you. Is that it sounds like coping is kind of like having to put up with something and you're just coping with it rather than feeling mutually attractive.
Right, right. So,
Oh, okay.
so instead of regulating your emotions within yourself, right, the person relies on their partner or even the idea of a relationship to just feel stable. I mean, have you ever known anybody, they have to be in a relationship? They have to feel okay about themselves. And when that happens, that creates this sort of painful dependence that they can develop on somebody.
And my guess is they're going to get into a lot of crazy relationships because of that extreme need. Are there biological reasons for this too?
I mean, there have been some neuroimaging studies that show that romantic love activates the brain's reward system. So, when we feel in love, when it's healthy and in normal love, we feel in love, it activates that reward system in the brain, right? So that feeling of wonder and
euphoria.
pleasure.
And,
yeah.
yeah.
But there was a famous study where they did look at these functional MRI scans, and they found that people who were recently dumped by their partners had similar activity levels in their brain. So they looked at those brains, and it was similar to people that crave cocaine.
Oh,
so
well, that's disturbing.
Yeah, so it goes beyond sort of the normal pump that we get from being in love. It goes beyond something that seems to creep over into changing the brain.
Wow. Powerful and alarming, huh?
Yeah, and those same areas in the brain that light up in drug addiction light up with love addiction. So it's the same areas. They're rich in dopamine. That's the chemical people hear about called the feel good chemical, pleasure, motivation, craving, and that's why love or the loss of love for some people can feel very overwhelming and even consuming.
So if love can mimic addiction in the brain, talk to us about what are the real life symptoms that we should be paying attention to.
Well, one that we're kind of talking about is that people experience cravings for attention. I mean, they feel like they have to have it, or they might have mood swings, like when someone doesn't answer a text or isn't available, they might get really upset. They might have some type of emotional outbursts when the relationship is in conflict, and difficulty just controlling their actions. There's often a loss of self-identity, or maybe there isn't really a good self-identity to begin with when we're talking about this. And everything in that person's identity centers around that relationship.
So for the person who has a love addiction, it seems to me like that their idea of love, maybe not even real love, but their idea of love is what gives them the high that they're looking for. Is that right?
Yeah, and that need to be in that relationship. So think of it like a drug. If I don't take the drug, I'm not going to get the high. But if I'm in that relationship and I'm in a relationship where I'm obsessed and I'm really feeling like I have to have that other person, that's going to give me a high.
But what if it's a bad relationship?
Well, then there's problems then when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And they have an argument, like I said. The emotional withdrawal then can feel very unbearable to the
I
person.
gotcha.
So kind of like withdrawing from a drug, then I feel terrible. And so this does create a lot of challenges in relationships. I mean, they can experience anxiety, panic, a drop in their feeling about themselves, their self-worth, and all signs that the relationship is not really being used for connection like we were talking about, but it's to regulate their emotions. And that's why love addiction can be so painful and confusing. From the outside, Norm, it looks like someone is just really invested in their relationship, but underneath, it's often driven by these deep fears, unmet emotional needs, and this sort of brain stuff that's going on that reinforces a type of dependency.
You've talked a lot in past programs about attachment styles. Is this somehow related to attachment styles? What are those, and then how is it related?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about how, healthy people need a secure attachment, but many people who struggle with love addiction have what we call an anxious and fearful attachment style. So that's marked a lot of times by low self-worth, by fear of abandonment. That's a big one, fear of abandonment, and difficulty regulating emotions like we've been talking about, and distrust of other people. I mean, there's a psychologist who writes about this and describes this as having a negative view of both yourself and the other person.
And that results how?
Kind of a push-pull dynamic where the person desperately wants closeness, but is afraid of rejection.
So are people with this pattern usually even aware that they have it and what's going on?
Usually no. So they might think, well, I'm just too sensitive, or I haven't found the right person yet. But the underlying issue is emotional regulation through this connection. Okay. So again, similar to using substances to cope, same kind of thing.
So what are the warning signs?
Well, there are a number of them. So listen to these. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and we'll see if these apply to anybody.
All right.
Do you feel anxious or panicked when you're not with your partner? Do you stay in harmful relationships just to avoid being alone?
Oh, that's a big one.
Do you put your partner's needs above your own? I mean, constantly. I mean, you do.
Yeah, there's no balance.
There's no balance. Do you experience emotional outbursts or depression when your affection isn't returned? And then do you jump from one relationship to another, regardless of the quality of the relationship? And the final question I would ask is, have you made major life decisions based on emotional dependence? So, like, have you quit a job because of that? Or are you cutting off friends or family because, you're so obsessed with this person and their problems in that relationship?
So what I'm hearing now is a pattern of extreme type reactions emotionally, like you said. Let me see if here's some key symptoms I took from what you said. Emotional dysregulation. So You said we need to regulate the emotions. Ours aren't in this case. That very low self-esteem and the fear of abandonment, that really stood out to me.
Yeah, and these are often, things that develop in childhood. So like neglect or inconsistent caregiving or trauma or a deeply rooted belief of just not being good enough.
Okay, we need to go to a break, but before we do, are there triggers that are common to most people in this kind of problem?
Yeah, the triggers often include emotional or physical abandonment. So that's the big one, when they feel like they're going to be abandoned. Past abuse, traumatic breakups, all of those experiences reinforce the fears and intensify this cycle of dependency.
So that's what could make you kind of click into this, be triggered into it. Okay, well, here's the good news. You can break this cycle, and Dr. Linda's going to help us understand that after the break. We're going to talk about healing from love addiction and how to build healthier, more secure relationships, starting inside out. I love that. We'll be right back.
Anxiety is something I dealt with for years. Got to the point where I did not want to leave my house. I knew that was not the best life. And all I can say is God delivered me. It's been over 20 years since I've had an anxiety attack.
When I'm feeling anxious, this is what I do. I pray and I go for a walk.
Anxiety for me always starts in my head and shoulders, and I start to get like this little headache. So I just start to begin to relax and praise. Worship should be a lifestyle. And so just give it to the Lord. Say, hey, God, this is yours. Deal with it.
When I feel anxiety coming on, I like to listen to music, especially worship music.
Anxiety does not have to control your life. Find peace, strength, and hope with Dr. Linda Mintel's new book, Hope and Healing for Anxiety. It's available wherever you buy your books.
Raising Healthy Kids in an Unhealthy World. Available on Dr. Linda's website, drlindamintel.com, and available online where books are sold.
Welcome back to the Dr. Linda Mintel Show. Here's a quick reminder. You can follow her on her social media platforms X and Instagram. @ Dr. Linda Mintel, at Dr. Linda Mintel. And on Facebook, Dr. Linda Mintel, author and speaker. Go to her website, drlindamintel.com, and everything's there, including her books, her blogs. You can hook up and listen to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Take us with you wherever you go, whenever you want to, and share us. The beauty of that is you can tell someone, hey, I just heard this great podcast. You need to listen to this.
Yeah, I hope people are doing that.
Yeah, I do too. So today we've been talking about this thing called love addiction. We've looked at the signs and the causes, but I want to shift gears now if we can. And how do we break this cycle of addiction-like behavior in our relationships?
So the first thing, Norm, is we really need to understand that love addiction isn't just about being too needy or too emotional. So people sometimes think, well, I'm just too needy.
Yeah.
I'm just too emotional. There's not really a problem. But that's really a survival response from people who feel that way. It's about filling an emotional void that feels unbearable. So that's the key as you're thinking about this. Is there some emotional void in my life that just feels awful, unbearable if I don't have another person in my life? And that will give you an idea that it's just more than being needy.
Right. And if you think about love in its healthiest forms, it's not supposed to feel like you're withdrawing from a drug or you're obsessed beyond compulsion. It's meant to feel like a partnership and supportive and definitely not desperate.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, at the beginning of a relationship,
Sure.
a lot of times we feel like, oh, we can't be without that person. But that's that love cocktail we've talked about that happens in the brain initially.
Right.
But as you're in a relationship, it settles down. So if your relationship feels more like a lifeline than a healthy bond, it might be time to ask not who you're addicted to, but why. What's going on about this? So love rooted in fear and desperation isn't loved. It's compulsion. And I think we could even say that with God, if we even, put the idea of God in there. If our love for God is based on fear and desperation, that's not the type of healthy love
Not healthy.
that God wants. But when our love is rooted in security and trust, it brings freedom, not anxiety.
Is there a time in a normal relationship when things go bad and it turns into an addiction? Is there some kind of timeline you could say, watch out, 19 months in?
I think you would know this about yourself. It's more like a pattern, and it's more about what you're doing with those feelings, how you're coping with those feelings. So it becomes a coping style.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you said the word patterns. I was thinking like probably a lot of patterns. Once we understand the why we're drawn into the unhealthy love, then we can probably see things more clearly and begin to make better choices.
Yeah, and a lot of this really comes down to that self-worth that we're talking about. And if deep down you believe you're not enough, you're going to constantly look to others to prove, that that's either true or not true, right? So you're going to do that. But here's the truth. No person can assign your worth, and no relationship can fill that gap for long, except the one we know about, which is God.
There's an awful lot of talk today about self-love, taking care of yourself, self-care, but self-love and care kind of gone to an extreme. It sounds like what we're talking about. But you said that alone isn't enough. Would you explain that?
Yeah, it doesn't really fix you in a sense, because the idea of self-love, it is everywhere, isn't it? Like, well, just love yourself, love yourself, put something on the mirror and remember to love yourself, but if your identity is still rooted in fear and trauma and rejection, just getting those affirmations from people, you're still going to feel empty.
Yeah, they're not real.
Well, they might be saying something that's true, but you're not going to receive it.
I gotcha.
So real healing starts with understanding that your worth isn't something you earn or achieve. It's already been given to you.
And now we're talking about God's perspective of love.
It was hard not to talk about God's perspective from the beginning. But, our value comes from the fact that God created us. He loves us. And He gave Himself for us.
Yes.
So that kind of love doesn't change when someone leaves you. It doesn't fade when you're feeling broken. It's constant. And Scripture reminds us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, right?
Right.
And that God's love is not based on performance. It's based on His nature.
We can't do anything to earn it, that we can't do anything to make Him mad and not like us anymore. But all of those things, even the things we'd put on Post-its on our mirror, are just words. Like you said, the truth of what's on there has to get into our heart, which means at some point we have to truly ingest the Word of God and believe it.
Yeah, we were having this conversation with a millennial the other day.
Right.
And he was saying, cognitively I've got it, but somehow I can't seem to get it into my heart. And that really was based in a lot of fear and trauma experiences that he had never really worked through.
Right.
So, if you're chasing love in order to get it from people, you need to be really clear about what real love is. And I think just looking in the Bible and understanding love from a biblical perspective, and to tell it, to understand that God is love. He's not just loving you, He is love.
Right.
And so somehow that whole relationship with God, if you see that you have a loving God and you see that He's going to perform things in your life, not because you're good enough, but just unconditionally because he's like a good father, right? He likes to delight and give you good things.
Well, you're talking about the big word transformation, right? This is all about actually believing something to the point where it changes you.
Yes, transformation comes from aligning your thoughts with spiritual truth. I mean, you have to replace those toxic beliefs like, I'm not lovable, I'll always be abandoned, God doesn't care about me.
Right.
I mean, you can just name
All the lies.
a lot of those lies, right? And you have to stop chasing love as a drug and start receiving love as a gift.
I like that. In fact, that is a powerful shift that can lead to transformation, from chasing love to receiving it, from people and from God. There are so many verses in the Bible about love, and why not? We know that God, as you said a minute ago, really is love, not just loving. He is the essence of love. My favorite verse from the Bible on this topic came from Jesus himself. He said, love one another. How? As I have loved you. He modeled it. That's how we're to love each other, he says. And he modeled perfect, unconditional love. When you watch The Chosen, you see that in the depiction dramatically on the screen.
Yeah, and you often see the disciples, struggling with that.
Right.
They don't quite do it with each other the way that Jesus is doing it with him. And sometimes you think Jesus is getting a little frustrated with them, like, I'm showing you how to do this.
Like he does with us, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then when your identity is anchored in God's love and his truth, you're not going to be driven by the fear of rejection or the need to prove your value because it's unconditional. You don't have to do that anymore. So then you're free to build relationships that are mutual, that are healthy and life-giving because you're no longer trying to use another person to feel whole.
That makes sense. Okay, we've talked about love addiction, what it is, where it comes from, and even the roles of identity and self-worth. But I'd like to get practical for a minute. What about the emotional regulation part that you talked about? That seems like a big, big part of the healing process.
Yeah, it is. Emotional regulation is essential because you need to develop coping mechanisms that don't rely on another person to feel okay. So when you're hurt or overwhelmed, how you handle those emotions can either keep you stuck in that cycle or it can help you break free from that cycle.
And this goes hand in hand with what we just talked about a minute ago, this attachment issue.
So developing healthier attachment patterns means that you have to learn how to build relationships that aren't fueled by that fear and desperation or insecurity, but, finding people that you can trust, finding people that you feel emotionally safe with, and that you can mutually respect. That's why therapy can be so helpful for people because especially the therapies that focus on emotional healing and attachments, there are some really good ones, Norm. There's a lot of emotional regulation in some of the therapies that people deal with, and you can work on that type of thing. There's a lot of techniques that don't depend on somebody else that help you manage your emotions. And then you can look at your attachment style. You can look at how was I brought up? What did I learn from my original relationships? And what do I need to do to make those different? Yeah.
So tell me about some therapies that are good.
I would say the emotionally focused therapy, if you look that up, that really helps people identify their emotional needs and express them in healthier ways. Another one is called schema therapy because it looks at the way you think and your basic beliefs. There's some psychodynamic therapies too that will help you uncover like what's going on and why are you having such a difficult time with the attachments in your life.
Right. So it seems like what we're saying here is we need to have clear emotional regulation about who we are in Christ, and then get help if the therapy can actually increase our understanding of those things.
Yeah, and when you pair that with the spiritual truths, I think that's key because you have to know that you're already loved and whole in God's eyes in order to give you that emotional stability to stop chasing love out of fear. It's a big shift for people, but I hope that this episode sort of resonates with you if you're struggling with this. I would really encourage you to take a next step, maybe journal about your relationship history or notice how you feel when someone pulls away or even just talk to a counselor. The key is to become curious about your patterns and not feel ashamed of them.
I love it. You can go from fear to freedom and from craving to contentment. But awareness is the beginning of your healing, and you're not alone in that process.
Not at all. And so healing love addiction is possible. With the right support, spiritual grounding, and the emotional tools, you can build relationships that aren't about survival, but about true connection, growth, and peace. Well, that's all the time we have today. Many thanks to my co-host Norm Mintel, who makes this show a conversation, and to our technical producer Wanjing Pu, and our editor Katie Sims Wilson. From all of us here at Faith Radio, hey, we'll talk to you again next weekend. In the meantime, remember, we're doing life together, and it's better when you don't have to do it alone.
Doing life together.
Hey, thanks for listening to this conversation from the Dr. Linda Mintel Show. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so we can live life to the fullest, walk confidently, and find healing and hope.